Welcome to reality. You're now on the Code of Mind channel. Have you ever caught yourself thinking the universe is too big to lose a single sock? You put a pair into the washing machine. You pull it out. One survivor. You're sure you threw in both. You remember the pattern, the color, even how you rolled them together. But when you open the hatch, something in reality shifts. One is there. The other is not. And yes, sure. You can blame the drum, the gaps, carelessness, but why does it happen systematically? Why do you have an entire cemetery of lonely socks at home instead of a warehouse of missing jeans, hoodies, and towels? And most importantly, why does it feel not like I lost it, but like someone carefully cut a detail out of the frame? Look wider. Socks are just the funniest example. Each of you has your own version. Pens you brought home from conferences and corporate events, dozens of them. But now you can't find a single one. Lighters that supposedly nobody steals, yet you're always short on them. Coins you put in the exact same spot and later you find completely different denominations, as if the scene got redrawn. You've probably had that strange moment at least once. You know you put the thing right here, you get distracted for a couple of minutes. You come back, and it's gone. You turn the room upside down, you curse yourself. You laugh at your forgetfulness. And then, a week later, the same thing suddenly appears in the most obvious place. On the shelf, on the table, right in front of your eyes, exactly where you already looked 10 times. And this is where it gets interesting. If you remove the usual "I'm just inattentive," it looks a lot less like losing something, and a lot more like a loading error in the scene. Like reality sometimes refreshes the frame, removing what isn't considered a main detail right now. Imagine the world around you is a complex game with limited resources. The processor isn't made of rubber. Memory isn't infinite. The system has to choose what to render in maximum quality and what can be cut down, disabled, or not loaded at all. The matrix keeps its sharpest attention where you invest emotion, conflicts, news, bills, relationships, work. Their everything is always rendered clearly. Faces, the words people say, even small details of the room if your reaction depends on them. But what doesn't affect the script, what doesn't trigger strong emotions, may be nothing more than background. A sock, a conference pen, another coin in your pocket. For you, it's a small thing. For the system, it's a temporary detail that can be removed from the frame if it needs to free resources for another episode of your life. Remember how it works in a dream. While you're talking to someone, you see their face clearly, their gestures, you hear their voice. But if you try to remember what the door handle behind them looked like, or what color their shoes were, your brain gives you emptiness. Why? Because the dream renders only what matters to the plot of your attention. Everything else is blurred background. Now ask yourself an uncomfortable question. What if the same principle works in waking reality? Every time you search for a missing sock, you're not just dealing with a household problem. You're touching the edge of the map of your personal simulation. The system rarely breaks on big objects. If your refrigerator disappears, it's too noticeable. If the machine reality breaks at that level, half the planet wakes up. So glitches and resource saving almost always show up in small things. One sock from a pair, one sheet torn out of a notebook where you wrote something important. One flash drive with old files that definitely was in the drawer, then slipped into another layer. It's like a test crack in the scenery. Only those see it who've already stopped believing in the absolute reliability of the scenery. And here's the main question. Why does the Matrix allow these small details to fall through textures so calmly? Because small glitches are safe for the script, but they perfectly perform two tasks. First, they reset your focus. Instead of listening to that inner "something's off," you start getting angry, searching, blaming yourself and your family. The energy goes into irritation, not awakening. Second, they quietly test who you are. Most people just wave it off. Whatever, just a sock. But in a small percentage of people, something else switches on. Wait, this isn't the first time. Too many tiny inconsistencies. You definitely remember moments like this. You're standing in the middle of your apartment thinking, I just had this in my hands. I know exactly where I put it, but it's not there. You're not crazy. You can see it's empty. And then an hour passes. Or a day. Sometimes a week. You open the same drawer. Look at the same shelf. And the thing that absolutely wasn't there is lying right in the open, as if it was always there. In moments like that, logic does a painful somersault. One part of you whispers, "That can't be. I looked here 20 times. The other part, so you don't lose your mind, instantly invents an excuse. Well, I'm just not attentive. I must have moved it and forgot. I imagined it. Because admitting the other option is scarier. Admitting that the picture of the world can be rewritten right in front of your eyes. Now imagine everything around you isn't just objects, but assets inside a big game. There is a scene. Your day-to-day. There are resources, attention, energy, events. The system can load the needed details into the frame, remove what doesn't matter, move them between scenes and periods of your life. While some small thing isn't important for the script, it can be safely unloaded. Free space for a conflict, a conversation, a turning point. But when that detail suddenly becomes needed, it simply loads back into reality. Sometimes right where you're standing. Sometimes in a ridiculous place so you actually think instead of just walking past. The most interesting part begins when something disappears exactly at a key moment. You're about to go to an important meeting, and suddenly one necessary document vanishes. You search everywhere. You're late. You end up not going at all. And then you find out a scandal happened there, or an accident, or a situation you really wouldn't want to get pulled into. You're planning to go see someone, and suddenly the keys are gone. You're angry, you blame yourself, and a few hours later the keys are found in a spot you already checked. Only later you realize, if you had left on time, that day would have turned out completely differently, and it's far from guaranteed it would have been in your favor. At that point it looks less like coincidence and more like trajectory correction. There's another version too. Sometimes you're simply not allowed to loop. There are things we're emotionally attached to. Gifts, letters, photos, jewelry. Through them we cling to people, to past versions of ourselves, to old roles. And sometimes those objects seem to slip into shadow exactly when you're ready to hang inside an old story for another couple of years. You get furious, you search, you tear through closets, you lift half the apartment, and then, in some moment of exhaustion and acceptance, you let go. Internally. You agree that it's in the past, that it's time to live forward. And very often, only after that, the item suddenly appears. As if reality says, now it's okay to return it. You stopped clinging to it like a crutch. It no longer controls your state. But there are episodes even stranger. When objects fly beyond the limits of one apartment or even one city. A person loses something in an old home, gives up searching, moves, changes their life. Time passes, and one day they find that exact lighter, chain, or flash drive in the bathroom of the new place, in the pocket of an old jacket, in a box they've unpacked more than once. And somewhere deep inside a very clear feeling rises. This simply couldn't have been here. And again you have two options. Quickly make yourself guilty. I mixed things up. My memory is bad. Or, at least for 1 second, allow the possibility. The scene really could have been redrawn. Why does the Matrix pull these tricks? Look at what happens to you in the moment of disappearance. You spend attention and emotion. You start doubting yourself. Your head loops the same frames. Where was I? What did I do? Who did I trust? Old resentments and conflicts often resurface because you start looking for someone to blame. It's a tiny glitch in your trust toward your own reality, as if the system is watching how easily you'll turn away from its bugs and make yourself guilty instead. But if you don't blame yourself, if you start observing, you suddenly rise one level higher. You stop being the character who runs around the room in panic, and you become the one who registers. Okay, the scene was clearly edited. That means I'm in a place where my reality line is changing. Sometimes disappearances and returns synchronize with your inner transitions. You change jobs, you leave a relationship, you quit a destructive habit. You start thinking differently about yourself. And in that period, reality suddenly begins playing with small things. One item vanishes. Another unexpectedly returns. Something lost many years ago suddenly shows up. As if the Matrix is clearing the stage of old decorations and at the same time tossing you markers. Look, you move to another branch. Through tiny details, yes, but you're not in the same story anymore. Of course, not every loss should be declared mystical. We really can be distracted. We can forget where we put a wallet or a phone, especially on a stressful day. But you feel the difference between ordinary forgetfulness and those moments when every cell in you screams, "No, this can't be. I know it wasn't here." Those are exactly the episodes you need to stop dismissing as "I'm losing it." Because the moment you stop attacking yourself and ask a different question, what is changing in my line right now? Why is the scene being edited like this? You become not a victim of glitches, but a witness of a reality update. And maybe that's only the first step toward one day not just noticing bugs, but consciously choosing which version of your life you want to move into next. A story about one man gave me chills. For many years, he flew on vacation to the same small resort town. Same hotel, same route, same receptionist at the front desk, who recognized him every year and greeted him almost like an old friend. The next vacation was no different from the previous ones. He enjoyed his week, packed his things, got to the airport, and entered the departure waiting area. And in that moment, a thought hit him. What the hell am I even leaving for? My visa is still valid, my vacation isn't over, I can just go back. He sat there a little longer, listened to himself, and instead of going to check in, he simply turned around, walked out of the airport, and went back along the same route, to the same town, to the same hotel. And that's where it got strange. When he arrived, he was met by an almost unreal silence. There wasn't a single person on the streets, no tourists, no locals, no cars, as if someone forgot to turn on the extras. He reached the hotel. The building was there, same facade, same sign. But at the reception desk sat a different administrator, a completely unfamiliar person, not the man he'd seen for years at the entrance. They gave him a room, of course. He went inside, sat on the bed, and sat there for a long time with the feeling that he hadn't arrived wrong, but slightly next to it, like the world hadn't fully loaded. Only after some time, when he went out of the room again, the picture suddenly finished loading. People appeared on the streets. In the lobby, behind the desk, stood his usual receptionist. Everything became normal. Later, local news gave an explanation. Supposedly, the town was preparing for a big celebration, so everyone was busy, and that's why the streets were empty. But if you've ever felt that moment when reality first looks empty, like the textures didn't load, and then the world suddenly snaps into full assembly, you know how unsettling that is. In quantum physics, there's an old question. If a tree falls in the forest but there is no observer nearby, is there sound? From the point of view of physics, there is vibration, movement of air, oscillation. But sound isn't just vibration. Sound is already an interpretation inside your consciousness. Until there is a consciousness that registers the event, for the Matrix, it's not sound, it's raw code. The same with reality around you. It doesn't run at full detail 24/7 like an old movie looped on a projector. It works like a modern game with an engine that saves resources. What you're not looking at can be collapsed into minimal detail. What you're not interested in can exist only as a general idea, without finely rendered specifics. Where you suddenly move your attention begins to load, like a location in a game when the character turns a new corner. That man's story is about exactly this. As long as he lived inside the usual route, the Matrix ran the usual animation. Tourists, locals, receptionist, bustle, the script of a seaside town. But the moment he broke the normal branch and unexpectedly turned back from the airport, he arrived too early, at a point that wasn't fully assembled yet. The town is empty. No people. A stranger at the desk. Reality isn't whole. It assembles under your focus. Now bring it back to you. You've seen these holes in the textures too. Things that disappear and then suddenly show up exactly where you checked 10 times. People whose faces, intonations, reactions on one day feel slightly different, as if they were reshot with different actors. Places you remember one way, but you find them in another state, as if someone saved a new version of the file over your memory. The Matrix saves resources. It doesn't hold everything in maximum quality while you're not looking there at all. Until you think about a certain person, they can exist as background. Until you return to an old town, it can exist as a template. Until you open the closet, the universe has no need to render every sock with an individual destiny. Skeptics love to say, "We influence nothing. Everything is already scripted, it's all a scenario." Okay. Then let's do it without esotericism. Let's break down an ordinary day, and you'll see for yourself how, with one decision of attention focus, you rewrite your reality. Morning. You had a normal plan. You wake up. The first minutes are the chisty, the cleanest. No news, no chats, no chужие эмоции, other people's emotions. You sit with tea or coffee and mentally outline the day. Work calmly. Eat something good in the evening. Watch a movie. Read. Be with loved ones. Go to sleep with the feeling of a smooth, normal day. At that moment, you have your reality line for today. You chose it. You internally told it, okay, today we live like this. You come to work. Everything is fine. Nothing catastrophic. And then a carrier of someone else's script walks into the frame. A kind coworker, as a messenger of the system's code, approaches you and says, with a caring face, "Listen, yesterday I heard them saying this about you. I honestly didn't want to tell you, but I think you should know." At that moment, they hand you a new script for the day. You had a plan, calm shift, normal evening. Now they offer you something else, offense, injustice, and inner monologue. How could they? The urge to prove something. And right here, you make a choice. Either you say, "I didn't hear it, I wasn't there. I don't want to live in this. Thanks." Or you dive into it with your whole head. What do you mean? Who? What exactly did they say? Why is it always me? And if you choose the second, you rewrite your day yourself. How one conversation destroys your plans. You start looping. Why are they discussing me? Why again me? I'm normal with everyone. You didn't hear those words personally. You weren't in that conversation. But the show in your head is already running. You invent lines. You argue in your mind. You justify yourself. You imagine how you should have responded. What happens to reality? Mood drops. Focus at work collapses. The evening you planned for rest and joy turns into, "I need to think everything through." Or, "I'd rather drink. I'm sick of everything." Result: your original day scenario was destroyed not by karma and not by the system. You destroyed it yourself with one soglazia, one agreement. Yes, tell me that trash. So who is really the enemy here, and who isn't? Interesting detail. Who do you get angry at? At those who supposedly said something behind your back, although you didn't even hear the words. Now zoom out. News, countries, conflicts. The same thing happens not only at work. You open your phone. A headline. In some country they banned something. A conflict happened. A new law was passed. You could simply register it. Okay. That also exists in the world. And then continue living your line. Doing your tasks, building your plans, changing your life. But you switch on emotion. What are they doing? How can they? You forward the news to everyone. You discuss it all day. What happens then? Your focus leaves your life and moves into a чужая страна. Someone else's country, someone else's power, someone else's conflict. Algorithms feed you more of the same. Your feed fills with similar plots. You emotionally live where you physically aren't even present. Your energy, your attention, your emotions begin to render exactly that reality. Where your focus is, that branch grows. You feed it with discussions, fears, outrage, and at the same time you postpone your own decisions. You don't take your steps, you push your plans into later. This is how you truly influence or surrender control. Every time you dive into gossip, live inside other people's news, get stuck in things that do not personally concern you, you give your time, energy, and attention to servicing other branches of reality. Every time you say no to mental garbage, return focus to your goals and your state. Choose what your day will be filled with. You return to your own line. Thanks for being here on the channel. See you in the next video. Bye, everyone.